Hey, everybody, it's your host, Mel Buer, and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Working People, a podcast about the lives, dreams, jobs, and struggles of the working class today. Brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network, produced by Jules Taylor, and made possible by the support of listeners like you. Working People is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. If you love what we do and are looking for more worker and labor-focused shows like ours, follow the link in the show notes and go check out the other great shows in our network. And please support the work we're doing here at Working People because we can't keep going without you. Share our episodes with your coworkers, friends, and family members. Leave positive reviews of the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and reach out to us if you have recommendations for working folks you'd like us to talk to. And please support the work we do at The Real News by going to therealnews.com/donate, especially if you want to see more reporting from the front lines of struggle around the U.S. and across the world. I first met George Fish at the Labor Notes Conference in April, where we shared a cigarette break outside of the conference hotel and talked briefly about what it meant to us to be part of the labor movement. The energy at the conference was incredible, and the optimism surrounding such a gathering was truly infectious. Before he went back inside to attend the conference, George shared with me some of his poetry about working in a union grocery store. Fascinated by his work and his life experience, I shared my contact information and thus began the journey of getting him onto the show. For this episode, we had an interesting conversation about his life, his work as a freelance writer, and his current work as a unionized grocer. At the end of the conversation, George was kind enough to read one of his poems. Welcome to the show, George.
I'm George Fish. I'm a published writer and poet. I also work as an essential worker in the produce department at Kroger here in Indianapolis, Indiana, also known as Indian No Place, world's largest county seat. And I'm active in my union, UFCW Local 700, the Indiana Mega Local. I'm in Essential Workers for Democracy. And I view myself as a Gramscian organic intellectual. You know, I didn't go into my job to organize the working class. I went into my job because I needed a paycheck. And I'm very glad I published 2 poems so far in Blue Collar Review, the Journal of Progressive Working Class Literature. I have a wonderful editor there, Al Markowitz. By the way, you can look it up. A new Blue Collar Review is out of Norfolk, Virginia, and it's an honor to use my poetry to reach my fellow workers, and I'm also reaching my fellow workers on my job right now because our contract comes up in a year. We got a very pro-company contract, and a lot of people are dissatisfied. So I'm trying to organize people to talk about the contract, so in a year we can get a better one.
Great. Welcome to the show. I think a great way to kind of just start off this short conversation is to talk a little bit more about your work at Kroger and your work with the UFCW. When did you start organizing with the UFCW?
Actually, I never started organizing. I got a job there very late in life in 2015. I had applied at Kroger many times before and almost got hired in the late 80s, but didn't get hired, I think, basically because I was considered too, quote, introvert, unquote, according to their personality test we had to take. But they needed people in 2015, and I got hired. And once I was in the union, by the way, on my first day of orientation, I joined the union and have been an active member since. And being with, and about a year and a half ago, I got in contact with Essential Workers for Democracy. We were very dissatisfied with our 2022 contract, which a lot of us found very pro-company. And although it passed on 2 votes, the first vote, it got roundly rejected. But the union insisted on another vote, saying that fewer than 10% of those eligible to vote had voted on it. So the second time it went through, but 40% voted against it. So there's a lot of good basis for opposing the contract among my fellow workers, justifiably. And I've talked to my fellow workers. They're concerned about pay, about COLAs, about more time off, about paid sick days, other matters too. So I've been kind of like talking to my fellow workers, just kind of low key and following the advice I heard from labor notes of 80% listen, 80% listen, 20% talk, which I don't always do, but getting to know my fellow workers, and I think I'm well regarded as a union activist who has good things to say, and I hope to encourage them because the contract's still ways away. And Indiana and Indianapolis do not have a tradition of activism, but we need it. And part of what my job is part of what I feel is important is letting my fellow workers know that they are the union. It's not the union rep. By the way, we have a very, very good union rep, a black woman. She doesn't take any guff from management. And it's not the officials, and it's not the international union officials. It's not the stewards. It is us, the rank and file. And I think that's a lot of people have taken inspiration from what the Teamsters and what the UAW were able to do because they had a rank and file voice. And that's what I'm trying to do within the UFCW. And I'm proud to be a union member. And I'm very glad to be a union member because I have protections that I worked 14 years in non-union shops as a temp, and of course had no rights. And we always dreaded, they say, management wants to talk to you. Then they dress you down and dismiss you from your job. And if you were lucky, you got unemployment compensation. If you weren't lucky, you didn't. But I've got this job security, and I tell you what, unions are a working man or woman's best friend.
I agree. Yeah, I didn't have union representation until I started this job at the Real News, and the difference between the work I was doing in non-union shops or teaching or working as a freelance journalist, it's night and day,
Yes.
and I really appreciate the ability to be able to have a bit more say in how the workplace runs, and to be respected for that, So I definitely appreciate the union difference here. And I'm glad that you have also noticed that. We met outside of labor notes, sharing a cigarette, and you had showed me some of your poetry. And you have just described yourself as a sort of Gramscian intellectual working class poet. When did you start writing poetry? When were you? What inspired you to start writing?
Actually, I had for a long time wanted to write. I wanted to be a writer. Unfortunately, I had an alcohol habit, so I was drunkenly talking about writing instead of really writing. Back in the fall of 1980, I was in my early 30s. I was in a bout of enforced sobriety for lack of money, and I actually wrote a short story that got published. And I was so excited that I started pursuing it from then on. And in 2004, and then in 1984, I had my first article in these Times. That was followed by an article in Monthly Review. So I started writing for the National Left Press. I worked on the staff of a small magazine here in Indianapolis. I started poetry Christmas Eve 2004. I was in an angry mood from my ex-Catholicism, and I wrote a bunch of very angry, irreligious poems just as kind of a therapy, and then put them aside and looked at them 2 weeks later and saw that a couple of them really worked out. So then I started pursuing poetry and published my first poem in 2007 in the Indianapolis area-based Tipton Poetry Journal. And I've had about 30 poems published nationally, mostly in small Indiana publications, but also in the website New Politics, and also in Blue Collar Review. So I combine both working and writing. And unfortunately, writing doesn't pay anymore. So I have to keep my day job at Kroger, or I'm a produce stocker. and I'm an older worker. I'm now in my late 70s, and I can't afford to retire because of a poor work record for 38 years. So I don't get that much in Social Security. But I do get a small pension for the union. And thanks to the union, which, even though I was still working, contacted me, says, you know, you eligible for this pension. So I was really grateful for the union making sure that I got my money, pension money, before I was too old to receive it or dead. And so I'm glad for that. And my wages, unfortunately, make up 69% of my income, so I still have to work. And it's a physical blue collar job. I'm on my feet 8 hours a day, heavy lifting of 50-pound bags of onions and potatoes, 30-pound bags of onions, 40-pound boxes of bananas. But it gets tiring, and as long as I can hold up to it, I do it, because unfortunately, there is so little social safety net, even for the elders, that should I be too old to work, I would have such a drastic drop in income that I would really be hurting. So I combine all three and write whenever I can, because writing is my lifeblood. It gives me a sense of wanting to live and be a part of life and contribute. And I'm glad to say a lot of people like my writing. They like my ironic sense of humor. You see, I have a sardonic sense of humor. That's because I have a million one-liners. I keep them so tense like sardones. Yes, I make a pun out of anything. Uh, so
Do you
it all came late in life, but I'm glad, and it's good to be alive after a rough time growing up.
Yeah. Do you explore any of these experiences working at the age that you're working, or the experiences that you've had in just in the last 30 years of your life? Are these some of the themes that you explore in your poetry?
Not yet. My poetry can be very eclectic. I've written a lot of things. Uh, Basically, I guess they're all explored indirectly. I had a hellish childhood, being raised Catholic in small towns. A lot of it that was in the Pope Pius XII era, was before Vatican II. And I became an atheist at age 18 when I entered college. By the way, I have a bachelor's in economics from IU Bloomington, and Indiana University, Bloomington. Uh, but I explore it indirectly because I write a lot of irreligious poetry that my good ex-Catholic friend John has said is theologically correct. So it's highly irrelevant, but yet it's theologically correct, because I get kind of back at the Catholic Church by skewering them with my poetry. But you give them suggestions on more topics I can write about. But my first poem in Blue Collar Review is based on a true story of an encounter with an obnoxious manager at Kroger that inspired me to write a poem. And like I said, I was encouraged by Blue Collar Review editor Al Markowitz, who is a very helpful editor, and always takes the time to give you a personal letter of critique if he doesn't accept something or he wants to change. He's very good in that realm, and I'm glad to say that every writer really benefits from a good editor.
I agree. My editors here at the Real News, and the editors that I've worked with over the last 10 years or so, are really the reason why I improve, frankly. So I know that I'm going to give you time at the end of the episode to kind of read a selection from one of your poems, but I really kind of want to drive home some of the other themes that maybe you work with. So we've already talked about a sort of traumatic upbringing within Catholicism. I am also a born and raised Catholic, and grew up in the Catholic Church. Probably had quite a different experience than you did, but still kind of walked away from my relationship with that faith at a younger age, in the last 10 years or so.
Well, you're a lot younger. I can tell by looking at you. You're a lot younger. You're a lot younger than me.
I'm
easily old enough to be your father, if not your grandfather.
yeah, I'm 32. So, yep. So, but I went to high school in the Catholic Church. So I graduated into, I was 18 or 19. And then I went to a Catholic Jesuit university for 2 years in Colorado. So, it was kind of, just kind of I don't know, sort of natural progression into various stages of education that is controlled by the church. And then fell out of it quite quickly, and also had struggles with alcohol, and found there was no room for both faith and my addiction at the time. And so I don't know, I felt sort of left behind by God. And I used to write poetry about the same stuff. You get angry, when you grow up in a faith like that, and you find that your life circumstances don't quite match up with what is supposed to happen or what you think is supposed to happen. And so, I can understand wanting to write back to that. And I think that poetry specifically has this unique characteristic where you can start and have those conversations with the pieces of your life that you are most affected by, and I was wondering, are there other moments in your writing career in the last 30 or so years where you found that writing has particularly helped with, whether it be the alcohol or the questioning of your faith, or other moments in your 30 years?
Yes, important. When I started writing seriously on a regular basis, I was writing for a number of small magazines that had deadlines. So it helped me overcome my horrible previous habit of procrastination, because editors just didn't mess around when you didn't make deadlines. So it got me off, it helped me break through procrastination, because I had to meet deadlines. I had to be good fast. And I think it helped me learn to be good fast, because I was an active freelance writer journalist who had to produce something every week or every month, and had to do it. So I did it. You don't want an editor scorned on your back. And
Right.
I want to thank you for sharing. Yeah, we have a very similar parallel experiences. I also want to say that because of my writing, my writer's biography is in Who's Who in America for both 2019 and 2020 that I know of. So people can check that out at the library. And I'm very glad that, I guess writing has given me my Andy Warhol 15 minutes of fame. So if I may be egotistical or individualistic on that regard, but every writer, I think part of about writing is a very egotistical business, because when you're a writer, you have the chutzpah to believe that what you have to say is so well written and so incisive and so interesting that total strangers will read you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 What are some of the things that you did write about? And you said you got published in these Times and other publications locally and elsewhere. What was the kind of focus of your journalism beat?
Lots of things. I would be assigned articles by my editors in the magazines. I wrote on things. I wrote for many left publications, Indiana themes. I wrote about how the Indianapolis Colts extorted the city to pay for an expensive stadium. That was the Colts Extortion Bowl, that article I wrote for Against the Current. I wrote a lot on Indiana issues, because it was your Indiana publications. When Indiana signed a Religious Freedom Act that discriminated against gays, I wrote a poem about that, and that was published in New Politics. So I've combined my political and other interests with my poetry and writing, and not just political interests. I also wrote a poem that was published, T.S. Eliot Was Wrong, which starts out with the famous epigraph from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, April was the cruelest month. And I write that, but T.S. Eliot was wrong, very wrong, although his language is vivid, picturesque. I say, April is not the cruelest month. January is, because January is cold and freezing and flu season.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I write on a lot of different themes, but a lot of irreligious themes and a lot of political themes. And I'm a great lover of blues music and punk rock, and also classic rock and roll, including 1950s rock and roll. And I have a special fondness for early 62 to 65 Beatles, because I think the Beatles did some of the greatest teeny bop ever been done in rock and roll, early Beatles. So I tried to, I don't want to be just a one-dimensional person. I'm more than just a one-dimensional political walk. I just
Yeah.
want to be as fully engaged in life as I can. And I've been successful at it, so that I'm not just a jack of all trades and a master of none. As my old academic advisor, I.U. Bloomington said, he said, I'm, quote, knowledgeable in an unusual variety of activities. And that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ascribe to a certain type of leftist politics? Is there like a specific ideology or political tradition that you find you identify with?
Well, for a long time, I was part of the Trotskyist far left, but now I consider myself a social democrat, a democratic socialist, in the sense of Michael Harrington, the left wing of the feasible. I think what's important now, and of course, as I get older, it becomes more important, because I know that my days on this planet are numbered. I want to see results in the here and now for me and for my fellow workers. And one of the big issues that concerns me, of course, is the Republican threats to Social Security and Medicare, which at my age, 77, I rely on. Um, but yes, I would consider myself right now an anti-authoritarian, democratic socialist, social democrat. I was very, very enthusiastic about Bernie Sanders' 2016 and 2020 campaigns, and wrote an article on New Politics praising Bernie Sanders' 2016 candidacy when he announced it in 2015, and started a discussion on that going on in New Politics. Um, so I think basically, I think revolution is a will o' the wisp. I don't think it's going to happen, but that doesn't mean we can't do things to make our lives better in the here and now. And that's what my politics is about now.
I tend to agree. Sort of pragmatic politics at this current moment.
And that was one of the things I was so exciting about the Labor Notes Conference this past April 19th to 21st, is that it's obvious now to me that the left wing of the labor movement is now a mainstream part of the labor movement. It's not a fringe. It's when 4,700 union activists from all over the country gather in one spot, you're not a fringe. You may be a minority voice, but you are an important voice in the labor movement itself now, which is so different from the old meanie Kirkland AFL-CIO I remember.
I was going to ask, in the last couple of years, there is this sort of resurgence of not just in the popularity of, or I would say positive sort of thinking about labor organizing, but also the new organizing and a sort of, I don't know, it's like the clouds broke and the sun came out for the first time in a long time. What is the kind of most exciting thing based on your experience of unions in the past and what we're seeing in the last couple of years? What is the most exciting thing about seeing this sort of resurgence in labor activity?
I think in the emergence of the organization active in Essential Workers for Democracy, taking a cue from what was done in the Teamsters and the UAW, and trying to democratize a very top-down union, the UFCW, which represents over 1 million people and a lot of in the groceries and food processing who really need good unionism. And I think it's been an honor to be able to participate with EW4D, Essential Workers for Democracy, and the good people who are involved with it, who are seasoned union militants, mostly on the West Coast, especially in the UFCW mega local 3000, which represents Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, but also a strong base in California. And we are all over the country, even in the Midwest. which lacks an activist culture.
Yeah, I see a lot of what UFCW 3000 is doing here on the West Coast because I'm based in Los Angeles currently. And, it's really exciting to see that not just the UFCW, but other unions are sort of taking on this inspiration of creating reform movements inside of unions. They care so much about the way the union operates, and they want to see it improve. They want this to be a new generation of union activists who are participating democratically within the institution of the labor union. And I think that is a really exciting piece of this sort of new era of union organizing, this more modern era of union organizing.
Yes. I mean, it's in for a long haul. It took a long time for UAW for democracy to win, but it did with Sean Fain. It took a long time for TDU, Teamsters for Democratic Union, to make a difference, but it did. And one man, one vote, which encourages the rank and file to participate. And as I said before, it's that we give us a sense that we are the union. It's not the officials. It's not the union rep. It's not the stewards. It's we ourselves, the rank and file. And when we have a voice, we really feel empowered to make a difference in our unions, I feel.
Absolutely. Well, we're getting to the end of our conversation, but I did want to give you time to kind of I would say we probably have time for one poem or one selection from one of your poems. Which one would you like to read? And
I would
go ahead when you're ready.
I would like to read my very first one, which is a short one. It's only one page, and based on a true story that happened to me at Kroger in 2021 during the time of COVID, when we had to wear masks, and my mask inadvertently wasn't on my face, and I got chewed up by a manager. And in a non-union shop, would have gotten fired for what I did, but had protection because of a union play. I went to the union, and was in Blue Collar Review in the spring of 2022. It's called "I'm So Glad I'm Working in the Union Workplace."
All right, go ahead.
This was especially driven home to me during the height of COVID, when upset because a heavy box on an ill-stacked pallet nearly fell on my foot. I was so upset I forgot to pull up my face mask. It was on my face, attached over my ears, but in my upset, I'd forgotten to pull it up. Was obnoxiously reprimanded by obnoxious assistant manager, and I blew up angrily in his face. In a non-union workplace, I would have been fired, perhaps summarily. Instead, rather than have to face that assistant manager the following day, I simply went to the store manager and requested a personal day off, which was granted, because the ability to do so was part of the union contract. Going home, I immediately applied through the union for a month's disability leave, which was also granted. In the meantime, the nasty assistant manager was forced to take a vacation, and when I came back to work a month later, not only had I calmed down, he had too. He wasn't hassling me any longer as he had, and even more beneficially, I had a job to return to. That is what union protection is all about, ensuring you don't pay through the nose for an inadvertent mistake by getting fired for it. And that is the poem I read to great satisfaction and appreciation at the Great Labor Arts Exchange at the Labor Notes Conference. And I'm very proud of that poem.
You should be. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your writing, to talk about your poetry. And it's been a joy talking to you. And I'm really glad that we finally, after a couple of months, got a chance to sit down and really discuss what makes your writing and your life experience unique. So thank you so much for coming on, George. I really appreciate it.
Great. Appreciate it. And please send me an email to the link to the video so I can share it with others.
Absolutely. And as always, I want to thank you all for listening and thank you for caring. We'll see y'all back here next week for another episode of Working People. And if you can't wait that long, then go subscribe to our Patreon and check out the awesome bonus episodes we've got going there for our patrons. And go explore all the great work that we're doing at the Real News Network, where we do grassroots journalism, lifting up the voices and stories from the front lines of struggle. Sign up for the Real News newsletter so you never miss a story, and help us do more work like this by going to therealnews.com/donate and becoming a supporter today. Once again, I'm Mel Buer, and we'll see you next time.